Welcome back to Unfucking Your Co-Parenting with me, Livy North. And today we're going to be talking about the four horsemen from the Gottmans and how they don't just kill your marriage, they're probably killing your co-parenting. And these four horsemen are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. And the thing that nobody tells you is they don't disappear when you sign those divorce papers. They kind of get relocated into a really toxic co-parenting dynamic. And the thing is, they don't just damage your relationship, they actually shape your children's emotional environment. So in this video, I'm going to talk about exactly how each one of these plays out in your wonderfully fun, high conflict co-parenting dynamic. And stick around to the end because we're also going to talk about how to stop participating in a pattern and quit hurting your kids. Because at the end of the day, it's not about winning an argument. It's about protecting the next generation from inheriting all of the crap that we have been through. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I put out weekly videos on insights on how you can navigate your high conflict co-parenting hell without losing your shit. All right, let's rip off this Band-Aid and get down to it. So if you're here, you know you're not just dealing with like a difficult ex. You're dealing with somebody who uses parenting, communication, and conflict as tools to control you, and it's exhausting. And it's not just happening in your inbox or on your phone. It shapes your entire emotional climate and therefore your children. And that's kind of where the four horsemen from the Gottmans come in. Most people talk about these like they're some sort of bad habit marriage killers, but this isn't trivial stuff. Dr. John Gottman, who is an American psychologist, and his wife spent over 4 decades studying couples in what he called his love lab. And they found that there were these specific patterns of interactions, and they were some of the strongest predictors of relationship breakdown. He could predict better than 90% accuracy which couples were going to end up separated or staying together based on not if they argue, but how they argue. Because conflict isn't the enemy, right? Everybody argues. But what the Gottman's research shows is that it's how they communicate during conflict that matters. And as we all know, high conflict co-parenting has conflict in the name. So there's lots of it. And this is what people get caught off guard by because we all think about this in terms of marriage. But after divorce, they don't magically disappear. If you couldn't fix it in your marriage, what makes you think it's going to get any better after you sign those papers? The thing is that they look a little different. They adapt to the context that you're living in. Co-parenting schedules, legal communication, custody logistics, school coordination, and every single fucking custody exchange in between. So what used to show up as like this slow erosion of your love and relationship now shows up as character attacks and otherwise mundane messages. Contempt that's disguised as like concern for the kids. Defensiveness that traps you into like this never-ending back and forth. And stonewalling that basically just kills all essential cooperation. And it's not a coincidence. That is the same destructive pattern playing out in a new arena. So here's what we're going to do in this video. We're going to walk through what they look like in your marriage and in co-parenting. And then we're going to talk about how to respond in ways that protect you and your kids from feeding into the chaos. Quick disclaimers. These communication patterns are most often seen in your toxic ex, but that does not mean that they are the only person in the relationship to display them. And the same goes for co-parenting. And as we talk through these, I want you to think about your own actions, your own thoughts and feelings, because you are never going to hear me say that you, as a healthy parent, are at fault or are responsible. But because we are human and susceptible to this stuff too, there might be things that you're not recognizing that you do that are actually making the relationship harder, either on yourself or on your kids. So let's start. Let's dive in. Let's start with criticism. So in your marriage, this probably sounded like the small digs about your personality or your worth, chipping away at like intimacy and love and your own fucking sense of self. But now it's going to show up as these attacks that are kind of like disguised as concerned about your parenting. So every innocuous conversation about drop-off times is like an opportunity for them to call for an all-out character assassination every pickup, every snap, every outfit becomes some sort of evidence of your irresponsibility and your instability. And how dare you put our children in sandals when it's only 45 degrees outside? It can drive you insane. But also, again, think about how that makes you feel and think about whether or not you do it. Because it is very easy to want to criticize the other parent as well. They're fucking terrible. They are doing all of these awful things. And I am definitely not telling you to think that your co-parent is the absolute angel and model dad or mom of the year. But think about who you're saying those criticisms to. Second, defensiveness. And this one gets a little more complicated because in marriage, this is much more likely to have shown up on both sides of the spectrum. And so probably is going to in co-parenting as well. It probably looked like your ex could just never take responsibility for everything, right? Every hard conversation just kind of turned into some sort of counterattack. My favorite one that I get from clients is, I wouldn't have cheated if you'd slept with me more. I mean, on the face of it, we can all see how insane that is. But like when you're in the heart of it, you always feel the need to defend yourself. So if we're being honest, ask yourself, did you get defensive too? I mean, and I'm not faulting you. When you're constantly criticized, misunderstood, defensiveness becomes a survival mechanism. You explain more, you justify more, you desperately are trying to prove that you are not the villain in this fucking story. And before long, both of you are arguing about what is right instead of trying to fucking solve a problem. And you, in this situation, you've become reactive too. And this is not because you're toxic. It's because you're exhausted and you're just trying to be heard. Because when you feel consistently criticized, misunderstood, dismissed, defensiveness kind of becomes a way of life. And that's how the pattern takes root. Deep, deep, deep inside that marriage that you have finally fucking escaped from. Let's fast forward to post-divorce. And of course, that defensiveness did not disappear. It just fucking mutated. And this is probably going to look like, for most of you, chronic deflection. If you raise a practical issue like, I don't know, scheduling, homework, medical care, they're just going to kind of flip it around and say that you're controlling, you're dramatic, you're difficult. The substance gets ignored because all they want to do is just attack your motives or your tone or your haircut. Who fucking cares? They just want to get under your skin. And the dangerous part is if you don't recognize it, you're going to fall right back into that old role. You're going to over-explain, over-prove. You're going to write paragraphs and paragraphs defending yourself against accusations that were never made in good faith to begin with and are definitely never going to be recognized because you're never going to hear those words. I'm sorry, you were right. Why do we still want to hear this? We never heard it in the marriage. Why would we hear it now? All right. Numero tres. Stonewalling. In a marriage, it probably looked very much like shutting down mid-argument, walking away, and just refusing to talk to you. Sometimes for hours, days, weeks, months, doesn't fucking matter. They shut down the conversation and refused to engage. Nothing's resolved. And again, this is most likely not one-sided. Sometimes your ex would shut down to avoid accountability, and sometimes you would shut down because you're exhausted and emotionally flooded. Gottman's research actually showed that stonewalling often happens most when someone's nervous system was overwhelmed. Like they had wires hooked up to people that showed elevated heart rate and their brain actually being in fight or flight. And it looks on the outside kind of like indifference, but physiologically, it is your brain and body shutting down. That is in marriage. In post-divorce, it shifts. So now stonewalling just isn't like freezing intimacy whenever you bring up, whenever you start a conversation with, I feel. Now it freezes logistics. Emails go unanswered. Medical questions get ignored. Schedule confirmations don't come. And decisions stall, making you scramble. Okay, and I'm going to stop right here because I can hear a bunch of you going, but Liv, aren't you the one who tells me not to respond and put up boundaries? Are you basically telling me to be the bad guy in this co-parenting dynamic? No. And that's it, but it's an important question because there is a huge difference between stonewalling and healthy boundaries. Stonewalling is about avoidance. It's a refusal to engage in necessary conversation. Silence that's used to create instability or to escape accountability. Healthy boundaries, on the other hand, are selective engagement. So when I tell you not to respond to a certain message or a certain email, I'm not telling you to disappear. I'm not telling you to refuse to talk to them about anything. I'm telling you not to take the emotional bait on things that are not related to the kids. So if the message is inflammatory and not about logistics, accusatory, not actionable, and just trying to reopen an old argument, it's designed to provoke you. You don't need to respond to that. That is not stonewalling. That is healthy containment. Stonewalling says, I will not engage at all, especially when it's actually important to like a decision. And boundaries say, I'm going to engage only when required. It involves kids' schedules, medical decisions, schools logistics, something legally relevant to your situation. You respond, briefly neutral, no emotions, done. But the most important thing is in a high conflict co-parenting dynamic, you have got to know the difference to be able to identify stonewalling and keep your boundaries secure. Finally, and worst of all, and I think a lot of people misunderstand what contempt really is because it's more than just anger or annoyance or like even hatred. It is a deep feeling of disgust because the person actually thinks that they're superior to you. You are beneath them. They believe that you are so flawed, stupid, controlling, unstable, whatever it is. So put your adjective in there. That you actually disgust them. And that is why Dr. Gottman identified this one as the most dangerous and detrimental of the four horsemen. Anger can be repaired. Annoyance can be discussed and figured out. Even hatred can be changed and cooled off. But contempt erodes respect. And once respect is gone, there is no cooperation, whether that's in marriage or co-parenting. And in marriage, this probably showed up or showed signs that this person was feeling contempt and sarcasm, eye rolling, mocking you, subtle put downs, right? And maybe your ex did it openly and maybe they did it behind your back and it was part of a whole smear campaign, which again is a whole nother video. And here's the hard part. You probably also feel it, especially after the divorce. If you have uncovered betrayal, manipulation, financial games, you've watched your children get hurt, contempt can feel justified. You know what they did. You know how they treated you. You know what your 4 children went through. And that knowledge and that feeling is human. Divorce heightens contempt on both sides. Your ex is probably also going to feel wrong, right? They probably believe that you took something from them, took their time, money, status. You definitely took control. Child support can trigger it. Custody rulings trigger it. Any perceived loss of control is going to trigger the fuck out of them and increase their contempt towards you. And when someone believes that they've been treated unjustly, whether or not that's true, contempt just escalates. And so now it's going to show up as talking down to you in front of the children. It's going to be these character attacks, completely gaslighting people and rewriting history. That's a classic favorite from your marriage. And somehow positioning themselves as the better parent. But where it becomes the most dangerous is that it's not contained between the people who feel it. It leaks into tone, how the other parent is described at their house, into size, facial expressions, commentary. And over time, that steady drip of superiority can shape how your children perceive the other parent. And it's not because anyone filed a motion or because they overheard a phone call. It's because they're absorbing that emotional narrative. And this is how parental alienation dynamics come into this. And the worst part of this is you can't control whether or not your ex feels contempt towards you. So you have to work extra hard to feel the contempt that you feel towards your ex. You don't have to admire him. You don't have to forgive him. But if you're the one who's leaking that feeling of contempt, whether or not it is justified, because if you listen to me at all, you know none of this shit is fair. You are also going to be harming your kids. Now that we kind of understand what all four of these are and how they show up in both marriage and co-parenting, what the fuck do you do about it? Let's go horseman by horseman. And we're going to start easy and go hard, right? Let's start with criticism. So when you start to get those texts about you always do this, you never do this, and the passive aggressive bullshit about your parenting, what you do to counteract that is you recognize it for what it really is. It's your co-parent's own defensive shame and insecurity wrapped in some sort of inability to take responsibility for their own shit. Of every accusation is an admission of their own guilt, their own shame, their own inner turmoil, and has nothing to do with you. And when you realize that, when you can read that email about how you're a terrible parent and the kids are going to grow up hating you, instead of getting defensive, instead of letting it emotionally affect you, you're going to read and go, wow, guess somebody's really doubting their parenting skills and worried the kids are going to realize they're a piece of shit when they grow up. Because you know that accusation is about them. You know you're an amazing parent. You know you don't need to explain that to your ex. So you put the phone down. You don't respond and you go about your day. You don't need to waste that time, that energy on their insecurities. Same kind of goes for defensiveness. When a perfectly reasonable question about like health insurance turns into some weird accusation about you being controlling and not giving a shit about the kid's health, you learn not to take the bait. Don't engage. You're not going to play into whatever narrative they're trying to paint against you. You're not going to defend. You're not going to explain. Instead, you identify the tactic and you say, hey, in your head, probably don't say this one out loud. You're trying to lure me into that game where you just keep arguing and getting all your anger and frustration out of me. And I try all of the ways to get you to see the light and you never do, right? I've decided I'm not going to play. And that winning is walking away. And you're going to start using phrases like, let's just stick to the issue. That's not relevant to the discussion. And if the conversation's no longer productive, you're going to say, hey, I don't think this is productive anymore. Let me know when you're ready to discuss XYZ logistical issue, and you're going to end the conversation. Boundaries, they're amazing. Defensiveness feeds on engagement. When you disengage, you starve it. But what about stonewalling? People find it a lot easier to walk away from a conversation that's unproductive and set boundaries that way. But what do you do when you actually need your ex to engage to get a decision made? Because we all know trying to get your ex to cooperate can feel more impossible than getting like your toddler to eat broccoli when there's a bucket full of Halloween candy on the table. So you have to do the same thing you would do with that toddler. You're going to set clearly defined expectations and clearly defined consequences. Because your ex and your toddler are basically on the same emotional intelligence level. And you got to treat them that way. Number one, going to state the issue clearly. To your kid, you need to eat 2 more pieces of broccoli. Becomes, for your co-parent, please confirm, pick up 5 p.m. on Friday. Pretty easy. Then you're going to set either like a reasonable deadline or some sort of consequence. For your kid, if you don't eat your broccoli before dinner ends at 7, you can't have any candy. For your co-parent, if I don't hear from you by Thursday at noon, I will be dropping the child off at 4 p.m. at whatever place. And the third, and this is key for both of these situations, you got to follow through. Tell me, how many times have you ever told your kid they're going to get a consequence and then you don't follow through? Oh my God, okay, just this once. I know it's a special day. Here's a piece of candy. Do you remember what happens the next time you try to implement a boundary? They're going to fight all the fucking time because they're like, hey, mom or dad gave in once. I bet you I can make him do it again. The same is true for your ex. I do not know how many times I can say your ex is basically a toddler. So if you follow up with, why aren't you answering me? You spiral. You say, oh my gosh, well, I didn't hear from you and I wasn't sure. So I did X, Y, and Z. They're going to know they're still in control. They're going to know it. So you have to follow through. But Liv, what if I show up at 5 and they're not actually there? I set the boundary. I gave them the consequence, but I still am left with the aftermath. Fantastic question, because it's probably going to happen too. And we got to recognize boundaries can only go so far. If it's a pattern that interferes with legal obligations or your child's well-being, like so many of them do, you kind of, for one, expect it because this is a pattern, and you can plan your strategy around that, and then you document it. Do not try to address it in the moment. Do not argue. Do not send 20 messages about how, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're such a bad parent. Why can't you be here on time? You can think it. You can feel it. You can say it to your friends later that night when your kids are asleep. But in the moment, all you do what every single high conflict parent does best. You document. Don't argue. Don't send messages. You give your co-parent the opportunity to fail, and you document for later use. Stonewalling only works when functioning depends on your engagement. And that's why I love working with clients who are in the pre-divorce stage where they're still building their parenting plan, because I can help them actually put this structure into the plan. So how decisions are made and what happens when there is not participation from the other parent is already clearly defined. And that can be life-changing for someone who weaponizes the need for cooperation. And finally, the hardest one of all to counter in both yourself and your co-parent, contempt. Because contempt is this deeply rooted feeling and belief, and not actually an action, you do have to radically accept that you cannot change the fact your co-parent is always going to feel this way towards you. You can't change the fact your kids are probably going to feel that parent's contempt in the other house, or that they're going to slowly internalize this superiority narrative and they might feel loyalty binds at some time. And over time, you can't change the fact that consistent exposure to contempt can shape how they view one parent. Not through dramatic acts, but through that steady emotional messaging. You can't control it, but you can control yours. You do not have to admire your co-parent. You do not have to forgive them. You don't even have to think that they're that great of a person, but you do have to learn to discipline your tone. And that is going to be really hard if you do truly feel contempt. I have tons of videos and content, especially on my socials, regarding the importance and strategies that you can use to ensure your home is the emotionally safe space that your kids need to recoup from that drama and trauma of the other house, and how they need you to be a safe space. And it's way too much to get into here. But when we circle back to the fact that your co-parent's actions are not about you, they are not personal. In fact, they are a reflection of their deep-seated shame and insecurities. And when you understand that, it is so much easier to understand their actions and see them with pity rather than rage. Now, it doesn't make it right. It does not make it fair. But when you stop seeing your co-parent as a horrific demon sent by Satan himself to make your life a living hell, and instead you see them as a scared, insecure adult that has never learned how to handle their own shame or insecurities or really even process emotions like your basic high schooler, that feeling of contempt dissipates. And it can allow you to focus on what really matters, creating and holding strong boundaries, and being the amazing, wonderful, strong, consistent, and present parent that you were meant to be. So that wraps up today's incredibly uplifting session. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share this video with anyone you know who's struggling with a toxic co-parent. Take care. I will see you next week. And remember, we're all just in this shit together.